After years of anticipation, some U.S. cellular networks have activated their 5G mobile networks. And while these high speeds are exciting, with new technology comes new concerns. In recent months, lawmakers have been worried about security threats when it comes to high-speed service.
And the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reports that the radio frequency bandwidth of 5G could degrade the accuracy of weather forecasting. Interesting. Joining us to address these issues and to expand on the latest developments in 5G tech is former senior counterterrorism official for DHS, Nate Snyder. He currently is a senior advisor at Cambridge Global Advisors. Great to have you back, sir.
Great to be back.
Okay, what does it mean that some mobile networks have activated their 5G abilities?
So it's interesting. So right now what's happening is Huawei is making deals with, European countries, others in regards to the actual hardware and some of the, I guess, what you would call non-core technology, which is another way of saying software sort of interoperability. So those are going into place. There's been shipments that have already been made around Europe. And then obviously there's, the talks here and the actions that were made by this administration, obviously banning it here, but also creating the blacklist as well. So they're moving.
And so I don't think we've talked since the U.S. Put Huawei on the blacklist, or at least they were threatening to sanction companies that will do business with Huawei. Do you think that that is sufficient enough in order to block Huawei from the United States? Because I think the key point that you bring up is the Europeans are still striking major deals with them. They control almost a third of their telecom network, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from a U.S. context domestically, it's helpful, but you got to look at this whole entire larger picture. Huawei is not just interested in the U.S., they're looking at a global scale. So yes, this could affect us in ways by our allies adapting this kind of technology and these vulnerabilities. And, when we're talking about the 5G aspect, I mean, sure, it's one way sort of like us putting our own ban and sort of like own firewall around the U.S., but that's only going to isolate us and, probably not really protect us as much as it would, say, for instance, for Five Eyes partners, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, were, lockstep with us in this kind of policy, but also, other, allies as well, Pacific, like Japan, others as well, who also have vested interest in this. This goes into not only our national security, but theirs, and also the way we share intelligence and information with these partners as well. We wouldn't want to share critical, sensitive information on a network that we know somebody's more than likely listening in on.
And so what should we be doing? I mean, should we be putting more pressure on our allies to say no to Huawei?
Yeah, and I think, that's definitely one place that we need to apply pressure, but I think we also need to open up a conversation with our allies on how can we work together to set standards on 5G, talking about interoperability, what we can do with non-core technology, what are software solutions, and sort of open things up. I mean, there's one really great organization called the O-RAN Alliance. It's essentially all the major providers at a global scale, and they came out with a white paper, I think, last year that essentially has the solution on like how to become competitive, globally, open source technology, but also looking at the future of 5G and elsewhere. So like somebody needs to come together, and I think the U.S. has an ability to be that leader to sort of drive that global conversation that needs to be had.
A lot of people, they look at 5G, it's something that kind of shows up next to the AT&T symbol on your phone. They don't really understand the implications of it. I hear a lot about the benefits of 5G. Oh, you'll be able to stream Netflix in 97% of the country.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll be able to, I mean, these are cool. This is very cool.
Yeah.
What are some of the downsides of 5G technology?
So, I guess the downsides of 5G technology is one way to put it is we haven't thought of them yet. 5G is going to be so revolutionary on what we're talking about. Sure, you'll be able to download a whole entire movie in like 5 seconds flat. That's great. And sort of the 4G revolution was more sort of like the revolution of apps and how they proliferated around networks. 5G though, just imagine this. You could have somebody halfway across the world performing an operation on a machine that would then have real time halfway across the world on an actual patient.
Wow.
Yes, you're talking about self-driving cars, you're talking about new satellite upload speeds, you're talking about how it's going to affect our military. And then obviously all the things from a consumer basis, where do we plug in? Entertainment, but also healthcare, various other things. So it's going to permeate its way through every aspect of our life. And so I guess the downsides of it is we haven't really thought of like what are those implications and vulnerabilities going to be once people start using the 5G network. So, and I think the only way to get a grasp of that is having a make sure sort of solution that we're in control of our own destiny in regards to how these tools and this network is actually used, as opposed to relying on the Chinese government and Huawei, which is pretty scary.
Are analysts expecting 5G to drive automation-led job loss?
That's going to be an aspect of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
when you talk about someone around the world
Yeah.
connecting a surgery here, obviously you can pay that person a lot
Right.
less than you can pay the surgeon
Yeah,
here,
that
right?
is one of the things. And then also looking at artificial intelligence and how that's going to be driven by 5G as well. Right now, AI is seeing a big growth, but then you put in the capabilities of 5G with the amount of data that it can upload, download, and retain, and the cloud technology that's going to go with it. I mean, that's just going to be more data to feed the AI, and therefore you're going to learn faster, it's going to be more applicable, and yes, so there are going to be aspects to that. But on the flip side of that, you're also going to create jobs for those who are in programming, those who are creating the interoperability standards, the manufacturing, in some cases as well. And I think that's a key argument. It's a good investment to get ahead of this.
It'll create the jobs for the programmers to replace all the other jobs.
Yes.
Why is the UK not excited about 5G?
So the UK, I mean, they're excited about it. I think everybody, put it this way, it's interesting when you talk about who's excited and who's not. So those in national security within that space are tracking this, like, you know, every single day. When you have lawmakers who are making decisions on this, you also need to look at their sort of digital illiteracy on sort of how this is going to drive and manifest itself, you know, globally.
Yes.
And I think right now, unfortunately, a lot of lawmakers, not just here, but elsewhere, like in the UK, they're looking at prices, they're looking at budget, they're looking at like how much is standing up the 5G network going to cost my country, my jurisdiction, my constituency, and they look at the Huawei prices and they're unbeatable because they've been subsidized by the Chinese government.
Right.
Whereas the national security argument really hasn't permeated as much as it needs to in this kind of argument, because people are still trying to wrap their brains around it.
Right. It seems very theoretical and maybe a little like conspiracy minded that would be happening.
Yeah, but I think one way to look at this and really hit this point home is look what's happening in Hong Kong right now. The mayhem that, you know, the Chinese government is wreaking on, you know, our friends there, but also look at what China is doing with the Uyghur population as well, sort of the pogroms they're running and, you know, forcing people out.
Right. Well, and using facial recognition technology to identify and track a Muslim minority.
To track them, DNA trackers.
Exactly.
Right.
And there's a reason they're doing it. There's a thing called Article 7 in the National Intelligence Law of the People's Republic of China, and essentially says any organization or citizen is responsible for working with the Chinese intelligence community to share data. Period.
Wow.
And so Huawei, which is essentially 99% controlled by China, I mean, I think its leadership, they're former intelligence officers.
Right.
And so you look at the track record, what's happening in Hong Kong, you look what's happening with the Uyghur population, and we're going to trust Huawei and China to say, no, we're going to be completely transparent. We're not going to share information. We're not going to probe into anything. Come on.
Trust us.
Trust us.
Wait, so I didn't realize that the leadership of Huawei is former Chinese intelligence officers.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it is unbelievable to me that the Europeans are allowing these people to control a third of their telecommunications network. That is literally the backbone of communication in today's society.
Yeah.
So I guess final question for you is, what can we do about it? How can we steal the U.S.? How can consumers protect their data?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, it goes with the overarching fight that our administration is trying to wage right now. We hear all about the Chinese, you know, trade negotiations for everything. There's a lot of concern that Huawei is going to be used as a bargaining chip here. And so there was a really important letter, bipartisan letter from both Senator Warner and Senator Rubio to the administration saying, look, do not use Huawei in the 5G argument as a bargaining chip in your trade talks with China. Like, absolutely national security.
So basically there's concern that the administration is going to give in on Huawei as a way to get the trade deal that they want.
I mean, let's just look at what's happened with past negotiations, and I hate to say it, with the president who likes to, you know, sort of shoot the hip and like, oh yeah, no, we'll
no problem.
Throw Huawei in, no problem, as long as I get a good deal, great. But it's a non-starter. Like, this is so serious. Like I said, we don't want the Chinese and Huawei cornering the global market, but also potentially using data for nefarious purposes, amongst the American citizenry. But what can consumers do and what can providers do? I mean, right now it's just the conversation that we're having now. I think providers right now through the ORAN Alliance need to come together. But I think, like I said before, politics is local too. So talking to your representatives and how that's going to manifest itself in 5G, start having these conversations. They're definitely not as tangible as they need to be, but I mean it's going to be a concern.
I mean, would it make sense from a national security perspective for us to subsidize our own Huawei competitor so that we can compete on a price level with the Chinese?
Yeah, well, we need to be careful when we're talking about subsidizing. I think we can provide incentives that will encourage our providers to get on the ball and start talking about their non-core technology, their own sort of software development. That's another thing too with 5G. A lot of things with 4G, everything was very hardware based on servers and actual like hard technology. The revolutionary aspect of 5G, it's mostly going to be software driven. So think about what's a good example? Tesla, right? When you get new upgrades to your car,
right?
Do you need to take it to a mechanic?
I believe not.
No, you just download it off the net, and you have like new operations and various other things for Tesla. That's kind of an example of what 5G is going to be. So if you want to go faster, you want to go larger, you just need to download a patch, and that's going to be it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. Thank you. Great to have you.
Really interesting. Next on Rising, as the 2020 candidates descended on South Carolina, the annual Clyburn Fish Fry did not disappoint.
And the Hill's 2020 correspondent Julia Manchester gives us the highlights of this weekend's events and which contenders are getting which key endorsements. That as Rising rolls on.